You're listening to the Religion Unplugged podcast. I'm Matthew Peterson. As a native of Columbus, Ohio, I'm honored and excited to be speaking with author, political analyst, and former Ohio State Governor John Kasich. We'll be speaking about his new book, Heaven Help Us: How Faith Communities Inspire Hope, Strengthen Neighborhoods, and Build the Future. Governor Kasich, thanks so much for making time for me today.
Okay, what would you like to know?
Well, I think just to start out, this book chronicles the actions of people of faith who make a difference in the world. And you wrote a very similar book over 20 years ago, but this one is different. It focuses on communities rather than just individual action. Can you talk about why that distinction is so important?
Well, Matthew, when you're trying to put something together, it's always easier to do it with a group than it is with an individual. And a lot of the things in this book are people who have big ideas. And sometimes, if you have big ideas and you're trying to do things alone, you can get it done, but it's a lot easier if you can find a platform that can offer you some support, uh, where you can get some other people to help you. So I wanted to connect it to these institutions of the church, the synagogue, and the mosque because they're such an important part of our country and an important part of our culture. And that's why I decided to take this approach. So any of these things you might want to do, a lot of times when people want to do things, they go, well, it's too big for me or too hard for me. But if you can take your idea to somebody that'll give you some support, I would think you would agree with that, right? You would have a group of people rather than just one person trying to slug it out, like Don Quixote. This way, you can really get it done in a really grounded way.
Of course, of course. And I'm curious, how did your own faith community, your own church, influence and affect your time serving as Ohio State's governor?
Um, not a lot. I mean, I didn't read the Bible to try to figure out what I was going to do when I made decisions, but I would say that my personal faith, influences me for sure. But if I had a tough decision to make, I wouldn't go to like Matthew 9 and try to see, it wasn't that. It's just that faith is a very critical and important part of me. And so as a result of that, like for example, when I went to expand Medicaid, I think it's important about how we treat the poor, people who live in the shadows, people who are vulnerable. And now, I mean, is that something that's exclusive to those with faith? Of course, the answer to that obviously is no. However, it always was something that I kind of knew, and I wanted to do that to help the vulnerable. That doesn't mean that I ignore those who are really successful. Doesn't mean that at all. But at the same time, you want to reach out a helping hand. So was that biblically inspired? I guess you could maybe say, and just from the standpoint of the faith informs a lot of ways, I think. We're all, we have one great thing when it comes through faith, and that is we have an ability to repent. So repentance allows us to pick ourselves up off the street and get right again. And that's an optimistic way of looking at things because
Hmm.
we all fail. We're all knuckleheads, right? We don't do all the things we ought to do, but we instead of just moping with that, you got a chance that kind of like a mulligan in golf. You get a chance to do a do-over.
Hmm. Yeah, you talked about expanding Medicaid and sort of how maybe faith sort of played into that. Kind of reminds me of one of the stories in your book where you talk about these Muslim doctors who came together in Toledo to
Right.
start this, like public healthcare
Clinic.
sort of.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, clinic. Can you talk about how you found out about that story and what was so impactful to you about it?
Well, I just think it was very cool because they weren't trying to provide services to the very wealthy or the very successful or for the people who were very poor. They were trying to deal with people who are caught in between, which is a pretty common thing. And at the same time, they were driven by their faith. As one of the doctors was asked by his father, what are you doing to honor uh, the teachings of Muhammad? And so he got together with some other people, and they don't care what religion you are or anything else. They're going to help you out if they can. So, Matthew, let me ask you a question since this can be what do you think about where young people are on this journey? Where are they today? People your age, do they have an interest in faith? Do they not? What do they think about it? What is it that turns them off, and what is it that turns them on to it?
Yeah, I think people are really curious and searching. I think people can feel the brokenness of the world, um, in a really acute way because my generation, we grew up online, and we're seeing more human suffering than any generation in all of time has been able to, because we can see it in every corner of the globe. um, and that wears on you. You don't just go through your whole life seeing that, um, and think that, I don't know, you don't just settle that there's no solutions. I think people want solutions, and I think
Right.
people are chasing ideology. And I don't think it's always religious. I don't think it's always spiritual. I think it often is. I think it is more than the millennials, more than the generation before us. Um, but I think they are looking for answers and ideology. I think they're looking for a box to put themselves into. And I think that's had some really cool things happen because of it, and some really devastating consequences as well. That's probably what I would say.
Okay, good, good. And what do you think we could do, and what could we say that would get them to just think about this, to
Mm-hmm.
consider it? Because we don't want to yell at them. We don't want to preach at them, right? I mean, you don't want that. I mean, what do we do to get them to show some interest?
Yeah, well, I think that's the key, is that, changing the verb from what do we say to what do we do? Because I think we want to see action. We want to see that churches are doing what Jesus commands them to do, and that you know all of these religions that have these
Right?
high ideals and high calls to life, so often the people who lead them, um, are not really living up to those things, and the people who daily ascribe to them uh, don't express the kinds of peace giving, the kind of love and charity that they're
So should we
supposed to.
show young people that we feed the poor, we help the disabled, we tend to the lonely? I mean, is that giving examples of that? Is that something that you think would work with young people?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we are a fairly pragmatic generation in our own way, and we want to do what works. And so I think, for better or for worse, if people see faith communities actually doing the work that they want to see get done, and that a lot of these faith communities promise to get done, I think that'll change everything. And I think it has. I think there are communities where that's clear and that's happening. Um, but yeah, I just think people are searching. I think people are they want something to cling to that isn't just me and whatever I want. Um, I don't know.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it gives you a reason to be optimistic.
Yeah. And I honestly, I mean, you're asking me about this, but I wanted to ask you, um, what is your advice to young people who are sort of searching for uh, community, searching for faith? Where should they start? How do they get involved?
Well, I mean, I think that they should talk to somebody who they respect, that they admire, who they think has some faith component to their lives, and just ask them, why is it important to you? Why do you care about this? Why should I care about it? And see what they have to say, you know?
Mm,
Uh, for me, I think part of it is, if you have a friend in Jesus, you're not alone, no matter what's going on. It allows you to have perspective on the important things of life. Now you're 21, 22 years old, and you want to be a star. There's no question. We all want to be a star, want to be successful. So I think what you tell them is, look, there if you and you have to first of all wonder whether there is a God in heaven, or all this stuff happened by accident. I think it's pretty clear there's something greater than all of us. And then I think you just work as hard as you can. And if you can, understand that there is a powerful being that has a purpose for your life and is going to help you out through thick and thin. And I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, I do. I mean, you got to tell me. You're a kid, so you tell me if that makes any sense. Um, but to me, it's a matter of telling that, I meet really little kids, and I ask them if they pray. When I'm out walking, I run into them and their parents. They say yes, and I said, well, you got to understand that Jesus is your buddy. He's your pal, just like your mom and dad. You can talk to him, and he hears you, and he knows what's going on with you. I think there's a sense of comfort if somebody can truly believe that there is a powerful being that wants them to be successful. That doesn't mean it's an easy road. The other thing, Matthew, I was talking to some theologians just a couple of days ago about the issue of faith. And I think what I would advise young people is listen, see if you get a word, see if you get a sense of something. And if it comes, pay attention to it. Because I think everybody has a chance with the big guy. But sometimes we're so busy or things are so loud that we don't hear it. Because I don't think God most of the time talks with a clash of cymbals. He speaks in a whisper, but everybody can hear this if they listen. So I have a friend runs a food program at this club where I go, and I gave him a Bible, and I always say to him, "Hey, have you heard anything?" And he always says no. He goes, "Maybe I need to be listening more." I said, "Well, when you're fishing with your father, why don't you just go ahead and listen?" We've been having this conversation for 2 or 3 years. Um, and he's still trying. I don't think he's never told me, "Oh yeah, I had this moment where," but I'm going to keep bugging him. But it's not my call. So I think to some degree, God's going to move first. This is what these theologians tell me, who I have great respect for. God will move first, and then it's how we respond. Sort of like, Matthew, if you want to have a date with some pretty girl that you go to class with, you gotta make the first move. She isn't gonna make the first move. I mean, maybe she will, but I'm just saying that with God, I think He's gonna knock on our door. And the question is, do we want to open it? So I would tell a young person, listen, just see if you hear something from this thing I'm telling you about, but then realize the value of it. It's kind of what I would do. I don't know. Does that
Yeah,
work? I don't
yeah.
know. If it doesn't work, then fix me, correct me. I'm okay with that.
Do you think sometimes people assume that um, God is something they really have to climb mountains to find,
No,
and
I
that
think I
maybe
mean these guys, because I've always been curious about why do some people have faith? As a 22-year-old, why are you doing a faith podcast? I mean, how did this happen? Why did you end up in that building to begin with? Obviously, something happened to you. It wasn't your idea, was it? Is it something that told you to go there? I mean, how did it happen? I'm just trying to say that I think something happened where God somehow tapped you on the shoulder and you responded.
I this all makes me think about something that was kind of going on over and over in my head. Is I think I have a lot of friends who are very um, confident people of action, and people who like to do things by themselves. And I'm curious, during your research for the book and maybe just in your own life, do you ever find people who really believe they're doing something good, but they try to do it by themselves and it doesn't really work out? How do those people get convinced that they need community, that they need other people's help?
Well, I mean, some people, Matthew, can go and do miraculous things, as were reflected in my first book called Courage is Contagious. But, like if you want to run for public office, if you want to be in politics, you need to get a clubhouse.
Mm.
If you're trying to do it without a clubhouse, you're probably not going to be successful. But what I'm saying here is, first of all, just because you're trying something big doesn't mean you're going to succeed. And sometimes you could try again, and you're not going to succeed. But it's funny, a lot of times if you keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, things will happen that you don't expect that will help you along the path. but my sense is if you do it with other people, these big ideas, human trafficking, the homeless, you got kind of buddies you're hanging out with, boys or girls, men or women. You're all it's kind of trudging together, trying to achieve something. That use the word that you use, lofty, something something sort of almost dreamlike, almost like, boy, can I do that? And I think that when you're with others, look, you don't want to do everything alone. One of the big problems we have in our country today is the problem of loneliness. You're doing everything, you're taking everything on yourself. You got to have people around that can talk to you. You got to have people around that you can communicate with. And so when you take on these big tasks, and they don't always have to be big tasks, it could be little things like reading to the elementary school, It's not but it's there's no such thing. We should not think in the terms of big and little. All things matter. The little things matter. The things we call little. Are they all little? Well, if you're visiting you as Matthew, as a fun young man, if you start to visit a grandfather who lives down the street, who nobody ever goes to visit him, if you go to visit him, is that a little thing or a big thing in your mind? What is
I
it
guess
for him? What's in his mind? Is it a big thing or a little thing?
probably a big thing.
Of course.
Mm.
So we got to stop comparing. Yours is much greater than mine. No, that's not the way to think about it.
Yeah.
So, get your buddies together, take on a
Mm.
mission, but it's more fun and it's easier to do.
Is there a common thread in faith communities that makes them effective versus not real
I
effective?
think I think some are not effective. I think some faith communities they're just sort of phoning it in, calling
Mm.
it in. Um, but there's others that are, where they say, it's not enough to just do this on a Sunday or go to a Bible study on Wednesday. Well, what are we doing? But everybody's different. Some people organize, like I organized a Bible study. Okay. I'm not great at doing a lot of the things that other people are good at. That's what I'm good at. I'm good at, I guess I'm good at organizing or voicing an opinion or, adding some spice to life and all that kind of stuff. Um, but I think everybody has their own special thing. And if you look at this book, what the book shows you is there's lots of things you can do. And I've mentioned some of them. Organizing a parade against human trafficking, um, going into the classroom and doing some literacy work, teaching a kid how to read. I mean, you can do that, and I think it's pretty fantastic to do that.
Yeah.
And you would like to think that the churches have a strain through them where they're open to working with people to try to do something special, whether it's supporting the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or, whatever.
How do you think we get that negative tendency out of American churches and synagogues and mosques that says, what we do here is for here, and what we do in our life is that's different.
Well, I
That's
don't
separate.
think that's not what you'd call a church or a faith community. A faith community wants to engage. Sometimes the church doesn't know how to engage. Sometimes they
Yeah.
don't have the leadership that knows how to do that. Like I have a lady out here who's got an autistic son, and she's very upset about what's going to happen to him as he ages. And I've told her to try to start some sort of a group home, and there's a guy who will work with her doing it. And I've said that to her, um, and she's just looking at me like, how would I even begin to do that? I said, well, do you go to church? I don't know whether she does or not, but if she goes to a church and the church says, hey, we don't have time for that, I'd find another church.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, was there any story that you found out about it and then through like the research and the interviews and just exploring who that person was or who their community was that really surprised you? Was there a story that had the most, surprises?
Yeah, it's like, Matthew, if you ask your parents, they'll tell you, don't ask me who my favorite child is, okay?
Yeah.
Um, But what I will tell you is there's so many that I'm struck by, but this guy out in Omaha who was a big cheese lawyer, big cheese in the synagogue, who had a dream one night about acquiring property and locating on that property a church, a synagogue, and a mosque. And it took him 15 years to get it done. And he's just a great human being, and he got it done. And I think it's really cool. The other thing is, the most shocking thing is I wrote about a organization called Convoy of Hope,
Hmm.
and it's located in Springfield, Missouri. This man who runs the Convoy of Hope, it's the 27th ranked charity in the United States. He met Mother Teresa in India while he was on a fast track up, trying to make something of himself. And she asked him, what are you doing to help change the world? And Matthew, he flew home and called his buddies, and they got a bag of groceries and drove around the neighborhood passing out food. Today, he feeds 640,000 kids around the world every single day. And they're doing all kinds of things beyond that. But when I went there, I expected this little broken down kind of shanty with people coming in and out. It was a magnificent headquarters and operations, everything being done to the utter excellence, which is what was just so breathtaking and positive, so professional, so amazing. Yeah, that trip to Springfield, Missouri was amazing. And if you're ever in Springfield, Missouri, you go to the Convoy of Hope and it'll blow your mind. So anyway, that's kind of the way I look at it. So,
Yeah. Are there any of the
and I was headed
organization?
out
Yeah.
there to the Convoy of Hope 2 days after I went in the Cybertruck with a bunch of my younger pals to see Metallica perform in Columbus.
Awesome. Awesome. Are there any organizations that you mention in the book that people who read the book might be able to get involved with in some way?
I think all of them would be open.
Yeah.
All you have to do is kind of track it down. I mean, it's not hard to find who these people are. Sort of like the Convoy of Hope. Easy. You contact them and say, "Hey, I want to help out." Now, everybody doesn't live in Springfield, Missouri, but you can look at these different organizations and see how you can pitch in and help,
Hmm.
and then find your own
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
start your own.
Um, this is not a particularly political book.
It's
But
not
as
political at all.
right. But as someone who's a political analyst, former governor, um, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a little bit about how it involves politics. You've been very critical of the Trump administration, and many MAGA supporters identify as Christians.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to hear, what is particularly concerning to you about the tangling of Christianity with the MAGA movement, and how do you think, anti-Trump Christians um, can partner with Christians who might be more on that
Yeah.
side of things?
I wouldn't tell you when I'm sort of anti-Trump. I just don't agree with him. I
Yeah.
don't agree uh, with what I find to be a more divisive approach to what we do in our country. But look, I mean, they're going to do some things that are really good and some things that are really not good. But my greatest concern is the bringing together of people in this country of all political parties to address a lot of the problems we have, Matthew, so that these problems don't create a flood that destroys your future. And without having both sides engaged, it's not going to work. I've never been personal in my opinions publicly about how I feel about this politician or that. I don't get into these personality things. I don't think they're constructive. But my concern has been this issue of how do we raise everybody up? How do we get together in terms of uh, I I think like with Christianity, I don't want to use it to try to pass laws. I mean, the faith community, whether it's Jewish or Christian or Muslim, whatever, to me, it's about the arguments you make inside the culture about the way you want to see things. Trying to weaponize the law, use religion to try to, I'm very uncomfortable with that. And so, but if somebody wants to be that way, I mean, who am I to, I mean, you be where you want to be. But as for me, no thanks. And if I go into a church and I hear them talking politics, I'm leaving. I'm not interested in that. I'm more interested in learning why Peter did this or Paul did that or why Jesus said this, or that's what I go, or why did Moses do certain, that's what I care about. I don't, politics is just, it's boring to me.
Yeah, very well said.
All
Governor
right,
Kasich, I think that's what we have time for.
Matthew,
Um,
it's been nice to see you.
all right.
Give
Thank
your
you so much,
parents my
Governor
best
Kasich.
too. They've done a great job and
I
you're on your way
appreciate
up.
that.
Live, hey, listen, live your dreams. All
I'll
right, I'll
try.
see you.
All
Thank you.
right.
All
Have a
right.
good one.
Thank you.